everybody. Happy Friday. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Lymph Lounge, the podcast all about cultivating a state of flow in our bodies and in our lives. I'm your host, Genevieve, lymph naturopath and founder of the Lymph Initiatives, a well-aging and longevity institute specializing in lymphatic health strategies. The Lymph Lounge podcast is one of those initiatives, part of the Lymph Initiatives, where you can access a collection of various topics ranging from lymphatic health to well-aging, environmental health, and more. It is available on Pocket Casts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify podcast platforms, as well as my own website, lymphinitiatives.com/podcast, in the form of blog posts and also on YouTube. Make sure you go ahead and follow and turn on notifications depending on which platform you are on. If you're watching from YouTube, you will notice the background is a little bit different than the usual white curtains. If you're listening from a podcast app, there is a beige pampas, I think that's how you pronounce it, in a white vase, and a sign that says "Keep it flowing," which is one of my favorite mantras. I now have my own office space at home, and I will be recording from here instead of the clinic. It will be much easier. No more setting up and putting stuff away because there are clients coming. So now my clinic is for work only, and I have a home office for days where I do not see clients, and I have been enjoying this very much so. Now you are listening to episode 14. We are back for another series of episodes, and it is my hope that you will love the topics I have planned for you. So let's sit back and relax because today we are talking about daylight savings time. I have a lot to say about that. We're also going over my 10 areas of lymphatic health and also what is environmental health, the new segment on the podcast that replaces the free resource. Talking about free resource, if you want to dive deeper into lymphatic health and have access to over 30 PDF guides, frameworks, workbooks, and more that you can browse at your leisure for free, sign up for the Lymph Fam VIP list, a weekly-ish newsletter that also gives you access to the Lymph Fam VIP Vault, a growing library of lymphatic health resources. Head over to lymphinitiatives.com/newsletter. So let's get into our first segment, my weekly thoughts. And this week is all about daylight savings time. Daylight savings time. The great debate of, is it useful or is it necessary or is it harmful? Every year, daylight savings time keeps reminding me that we live in a world with so many old systems of functioning that are not conducive to cultivating a state of flow and harmony in our body and in our lives. Researchers say that the change has long-term negative consequences for our bodies and minds when it comes to changing to daylight savings time. There is no denying it. Daylight savings does affect our biological clock. The scientific evidence points to acute increases in adverse health consequences from changing the clocks, and that includes heart attacks and strokes, exacerbation of mood disorders, depression, anxiety, and substance abuse, a heightened risk of mood disturbances and hospital admissions, as well as elevated production of inflammatory markers in response to the stress of disturbing our light cycle. The potential for car crashes also spikes just after the spring forward. In fact, a 2020 study found that the switch raises the risk of fatal traffic accidents by 6%. So if we look at the delicate balance of melatonin and serotonin when it comes to the light cycle, there is no denying that changing the times like that will affect us. Sunlight is the most powerful synchronizer of our circadian rhythms, the internally generated clocks our bodies follow, and we function our best when our sleep-wake cycle follows the sun. We get sleepy due in part to melatonin release when it gets dark. So melatonin rises and then serotonin is suppressed naturally because of that. And that makes us sleepy and ready for bed. In the spring when we switch to daylight savings time, we increase the amount of light we're exposed to in the evening hours. While it can seem to our advantage to have more time for outdoor activities in the evening, exposure to more light closer to bedtime makes it harder to fall asleep at our usual bedtime and can reduce the amount of sleep we're able to get each night. We also lose light in the morning, leaving many of us waking up in the dark. All of this is actually really bad for our natural light cycle because exposure to light in the morning makes the melatonin go down. So it naturally suppresses melatonin, and then serotonin will naturally rise, and that has an alerting effect. This cycle helps us maintain a strong circadian rhythm. So we live half the year in a disturbed light cycle, and we wonder why some people have sleep problems, right? Nevertheless, it is here and probably here to stay, and what can we do about it? There are things we can do to help our body through this transition that is imposed on us for arbitrary reasons. But before we dive into those various things, I'd like to go over how daylight savings came to be. I love history, and I always find it so fascinating to dive into how things came to be. And that kind of helps us understand why things are a certain way. And I find it very empowering when it comes to what can we do about it, right? So in 1915, the German government began brainstorming ways to save energy for battle during the First World War. That is how long it has been a debate. During that time, they needed their citizens to reduce the use of artificial light and conserve resources that were becoming scarce, of course, like fossil fuels. Their solution at the time was to have more daylight during working hours by pushing the clocks forward 1 hour in the springtime. It was believed that adjusting the time would encourage people to use less energy to light up their home and then reserve those important resources for the war. The first iteration of daylight savings time was officially implemented 2 years into the First World War in Germany. And after Germany established this practice, almost every other country that fought in the war followed suit, including Canada, the United States, and much of Europe. In 1918, the Canadian government formally introduced daylight savings time as a way to increase production during wartime as well. With the end of the First War, the federal government ceased daylight savings time, actually, but resumed the practice during the Second World War again. And during the Second World War, daylight savings time was used all year around in Canada. And what's interesting is while the concept of daylight savings time originated with the principle of saving energy and saving resources, today critics say that there are still other ways to consume energy, including watching TV, running fans, using heaters, and driving. So it's not just limited to lighting up our homes. And according to critics, these energy-consuming activities will occur regardless of whether an hour of daylight is saved or not. It's not about just that 1 hour anymore. And as society evolved, lighting accounts for less overall energy consumption anyway. Rather, extending the daylight hours actually encourages people to use more air conditioning and heating today. And not all jurisdictions in Canada actually, or the United States even, observe daylight savings time. So Saskatchewan, the Yukon, Arizona, and parts of northern BC are places where this practice is not recognized. And hopefully we can hope that it spreads beyond those regions. Overall, only time will tell whether daylight savings time is here to stay. So, what can we do about it? There are things we can do about it. Making a big focus on your light cycle will help tremendously. So make sure you get natural sunlight exposure morning and night, sunrise, sundown, and to make sure you reduce your blue light exposure. That is another factor now that adds to the effects. So here's 3 tips to help ease your body into daylight savings time in particular. Set your clocks ahead 1 hour on Saturday evening and go to bed at your normal bedtime. Head outside for some early morning sunlight Sunday morning. Very important. Important every day, but that morning is very important because exposure to sunlight will help keep your morning routine regulated. Get plenty of sleep on Sunday night to ensure you're rested and ready for the week. And in the LymphFam VIP vault that you get access to by joining the LymphFam VIP list, so the newsletter, I have a sleep optimization guide that can become handy as well for the next couple of weeks. Of course, it can be handy at any time, but sleep support is going to be extremely important starting tomorrow, Sunday, and then for weeks to come. Now let's move on to the next segment, and today it is about lymphatic health. We are going to cover together my 10 areas of lymphatic health, all the areas that I work with when I work with clients, and some of the things you can do at home to support all of them. So what exactly is lymphatic health? As you may already know, I am a lymph naturopath, so I specialize in supporting the lymphatic system through natural health assessments and methods. I also blend a lot of Oriental medicine into what I do because it is another discipline that is really big on lymph and fascia. And the goal of supporting the lymphatic system is to support natural detoxification, of course, but also support natural regeneration because the lymphatic system brings a lot of regeneration materials to all of our tissues. Let's not forget about that. And when I was first officially introduced to the intricacy of the lymphatic system back in 2016, I immediately wondered, why isn't everyone all over this information? Why are we not talking about the importance of the lymphatic system in just everyday life? The lymphatic system helps and works with our whole body and plays a major role in detoxification and regeneration, and like I said, which keeps our body functioning properly, functioning optimally. However, I will tell you that in recent years, the lymphatic system is, yes, finally getting the recognition it deserves. But what it also means is that there is more and more information out there, and that information is not always quite accurate. So it can be overwhelming, contradictory sometimes, and just hard to know if it's useful information or not. So guess what? We are right on time here. So today I want to cover all of the areas of lymphatic health with you so you can start to understand how everything is connected and how lymphatic health fits into general health. It is one of the lessons that the lymphatic system can teach us is that everything is connected. Let's start with the first area. And I put it first because to me it is the most important, and that is nervous system regulation. So the lymph doesn't circulate well when the body is in fight or flight. For example, if you have coffee on an empty stomach in the morning, the effect it has on your body is similar to being chased by a bear. So the effect that it has on your nervous system, your body doesn't know the difference, and it will remain like this for the rest of the day. So you can see how some of the daily habits you have can affect your lymphatic health. If you're in fight or flight, if your nervous system believes it's being chased by a bear, instead of being in rest and digest, the lymph does not circulate well. So that's the first area. Second area is, of course, lifestyle factors. I'm sure you're not surprised about this. And that can range from everything from movement. So the lymph circulate in what is known as the fascia. The fascia has been recently discovered. A lot of natural health disciplines already knew about the fascia, and it is a layer of connective tissue that lines many surfaces in our body. And when we do not move, we can develop tight fascia or fascial adhesions, and it can become harder for the lymph to move through that and do its work. So that's just one example. Another example of this is diet. So too much protein, too many processed foods, that or not enough protein as well actually can affect the lymphatic system, nutrient deficiencies, dehydration. All of that affects the quality of the lymph and the quality of the tissues that the lymph flows through, and that will affect ultimately lymph flow and lymphatic health. Stress, of course, plays a major role as well, mainly because stress strips our body of minerals. And the body needs minerals to detoxify. So when there's not enough mineral, there is extra load on the lymphatic system. And that eventually can create a backup in your lymphatic system. Your levels of inflammation, again, can play a role in lifestyle factors, sleep hygiene, energy levels. Those are the most common lifestyle factors that can affect lymphatic health. The third area, what I call your unique body constitution. What is unique to your own body? What stresses your body more than other things? And how do we support your body in this? So it's important to know what are the unique factors about your body and what are the main stressors for your body. And this is why it's so important when it comes to what you see online and what you read online, what others are doing. What works for others might not work for you, and what works for you might not work for others. So be careful of that general lymphatic health advice online or general advice for lymph flow and drainage and all that, because at the end of the day, it can work for most people and maybe it doesn't work for you. Then the fourth area we have is the lymphatic system itself. Like tonsils, spleen, appendix, all of the organs that are part of the lymphatic system. If you've had your appendix removed or your tonsils removed, that will affect your lymphatic system. And how do we support the body when trying to compensate for those missing organs? Fifth area is connective tissue health. So I touched a little bit on that in one of the first areas that I talked about. But ultimately, this is why in my business, I actually have one area of my business dedicated to connective tissue health, because the lymph flow will be as healthy at the tissues it flows through. Are there adhesions? Are there scars? Are there things that limit lymph flow in the tissues? Because if the tissues are fragile or thin or tense, well, the lymph will have a hard time flowing through those tissues. This is why so many people need lymph drainage therapy to help move the lymph manually. It's all about the health of the tissues that the lymph is flowing through. So that's a very important factor. Now, the sixth area of lymphatic health, the drainage pathways. And it is probably the one that I'm the most passionate about at the moment, because once the lymph has done its full cycle, where does the waste go? Have you ever asked yourself that? And that was actually one of my first questions early on. Whatever the lymph has processed, it needs to be eliminated. So where does it go? And it goes through all of those drainage pathways. But it's like a two-pronged approach. Not only is some drainage pathways bring in toxicants from the outside, and then the lymph has to deal with that, but also some drainage pathways help to eliminate what the lymph has processed. And those pathways need to be open and free-flowing. We're talking about the colon, the kidneys, the liver, the gallbladder, the lungs, the skin, and so on. I actually have 2 episodes that I dedicated to drainage pathways, and I'm going to link in the episode description. Then the 7th area of lymphatic health is your toxic burden and your low tox living habits. And here I use low tox because we cannot aim for 0 tox anymore, okay? It is absolutely impossible, unattainable. It's just aiming for 0 is just going to make you more stressed and very unhappy. But aim for a low tox way of living when it comes to toxic burden. You may not have heard this before, but at least if heavy metals and mold are not addressed, it can be hard to deal with the toxic burden. So sometimes it's not even about the popular toxic burden that is talked about. It can be other things. So I find, when mold and heavy metals are not addressed, it's harder for the body to address the toxic burden. So those are big pieces of the puzzle. Now let's move on to the 8th area, which is immunity. The immune system travels through the lymphatic system. And immunity is not just when we're sick. Actually, our immune system is a surveillance system that is always coming through our body to address external and internal threats. It is constantly on. And when our lymph system is stressed or not flowing properly, then our immune system can become stressed as well and not flowing as well, right? So supporting immunity supports our lymphatic health as well. 9th area are emotions. And another big aspect that can affect your lymphatic health. Emotions that are not dealt with can be stored in the body. And in Oriental medicine, emotions can lead to dis-ease. So emotions are stored in fascia. See how everything is connected? And the lymph flows through the fascia. And there is often actually emotional releases either during a treatment or afterwards. That happens very often. And it is normal because we are moving the very system that helps your body process and store emotions. And why does the body do that? Why does it store emotions? I get that question a lot, and it can be heavy for the body to deal with emotions. So the tendency is to store it. But you cannot stay in that state too long because, again, that can lead to dis-ease in Oriental medicine. So one of those areas of lymphatic health is to look at emotional trauma. And no, I am not a psychologist or a counselor. I am very well aware of my limitations in that area. And I always support clients in whatever works better for them to go see professionals that can help them deal with some emotional trauma. However, sometimes the body also can benefit from physical interventions to help emotions flow more easily out of the body. We're talking, yes, lymphatic drainage, EFT tapping, and Qigong. Those are my top 3. And last but not least, the 10th area of lymphatic health is all of our natural cycles. The lymphatic system is very sensitive to the natural cycles of the body and of our environments. We're talking about the monthly cycle for women, excess hormones that have to be processed. Remember, the lymphatic system detoxifies excess hormones. The seasons, the daylight cycle, because again, melatonin, serotonin are influenced by that. The moon cycles, and more. For example, certain organs are more energetic during certain seasons, and a lot of those organs actually are drainage pathways as well. The spring season, the gallbladder is more energetic, and the gallbladder is a huge drainage pathway. So depending on the season, this will affect how your body detoxifies and regenerates, and will change the type of support that your body needs. If your body needs a lot of detoxification, well, maybe the time of year is not ideal if it's not spring. And there's other things we can do to help support detoxification until your body is ready and it is the right time. Maybe it's not the time to go full-blown liver detox. Maybe there are other steps that we need to do, and maybe it's not the right time of the year to do that. Also, during our monthly cycle, there are times where the body needs to detoxify excess hormones, like I said earlier. And how do we ensure the drainage pathways are open during those times? What extra detoxification support does the body need? So this is my breakdown of all of the areas of lymphatic health that I work with. And I hope this has been helpful, maybe to understand a little bit more how to support your own lymphatic health. And if you take anything away from this segment today, remember that it all starts with nervous system regulation. So taking the body out of fight or flight to bring it into rest and digest, or to avoid being in that state for too long. Remember, stress is normal in life, but we don't want to stay there too long, or we don't want it to become chronic. So that's a good place to start, nervous system regulation. For example, grounding in nature, deep breathing, meditating, taking advantage of the healing rays of the sun. I do have a free nervous system regulation guide inside the LymphFam VIP vault again, so you can check it out. Now let's move on to our last segment, environmental health. Super excited about this. I know I've been talking about it a lot. So what is environmental health? There is a lot of talk over the last few years about environmental toxins, environmental exposures, and environmental health. But what exactly is it? So environmental health can be split in a few different categories. You have air pollution, water contamination, toxic chemicals, and products like everyday products that you use. And also in there, you can also add lack of green spaces. So at its core, environmental health examines how the world around us, so our air, water, food, and even the products we use every day, affects our physical and mental health. Often these connections are invisible, but their impact is still very real. For example, air pollution. If you live near traffic, high traffic areas, or near a factory, or you live in an area that has a lot of wildfires, that can worsen the air quality. So how do we address that? To make sure that the body is supported. Another example is water contamination. Chemicals like lead in drinking water have been linked to IQ loss, learning disabilities, and behavioral issues, especially in children. So again, what is within our control when dealing with those? And to add another example, you also have the toxic chemicals in products. So everyday items like plastic containers may contain endocrine disrupting chemicals like BPA or phthalates, interfere with hormones, and can contribute to cancer, fertility issues, and metabolic disorders. So the other aspect of that too is lack of green spaces. Green spaces such as parks, gardens, and forests actually play a vital role in environmental health and improving air quality, reducing urban heat, providing a natural buffer against pollution. And they're linked to better mental health as well. So it's an important factor. The negative ions, our body loves that to lower the stress levels. And it also allows for increased physical activity if the green spaces are right there. And while many environmental health related issues are too big for individuals to tackle on their own, there are many things we can do to lower our everyday exposure and take better control of our environment. And this is why I want to have a special segment dedicated to this in every episode. I want to cover, low tox living topics, information about environmental chemicals, news pieces, research, and more. There is so many topics, in fact, that I had a hard time to choose which one I wanted to share with you today. And I decided to start light and go with a recently posted analysis of a popular matcha green tea beverage. Now, I'm a big fan of matcha green tea, and now I even sell my own blend with some other herbal benefits. So it did catch my attention, and I have attached a link to the article or the post if you are curious. So what they did is they took the product and sent it to a lab, and then they shared about the findings. So we see that type of experiment a lot. And I'm all about low tox living and awareness about environmental chemicals and to be careful with our exposures. But what I'm also equally particular about is how we manipulate that information and the importance of looking at it from a contextual lens. Otherwise, it will just spark fear. And that's not good. Fear affects the kidneys, which is a drainage pathway, right? So not really good overall for lymphatic health. So a sample of a matcha tea drink was sent to that lab for analysis, and the results came back. And in the analysis, they show a few heavy metals. But one of them was lead at 72 parts per billion, which is around 0.072 milligrams per liter. So based on this information alone, you may think that this matcha tea is absolutely loaded with lead and that those levels are toxic, right? Having the information just like that. That's where our mind wants to go naturally. But this data without context is nothing less than fear-mongering material. Now, the original article discussed lead and other substances in the context of children and toddlers. But children and toddlers do not drink matcha tea, first of all. And the product in question was not marketed for children and toddlers. So I want to discuss this information in terms of what it means in the context of everyday adult life in modern society. So in Canada, under the Food and Drugs Act, the maximum allowable lead concentration in Canadian beverages is 200 parts per billion, which is around 0.2 milligrams per liter. The highest category for lead content is actually wine. Do you want to cut wine out of your life? I don't think many people would want to. So with the matcha drink in question, we are at 72, which is much lower than the allowable concentration. And just to reiterate that no level of lead is safe. However, unfortunately, we live in a world that is polluted. It's the reality. So reaching for zero lead exposure anywhere is just unattainable. And it can even add unnecessary stress in your life if you try to aim for zero, because it's not going to happen. And to try to hold companies and brands to that standard, it's not just unrealistic, it is plain impossible. There's 5 parts per billion allowed just in drinking water in Canada. So right there, it shows us that zero exposure to lead is absolutely impossible. What is possible, however, is filtering your water. So I want to bring this back to what is within our control. This is where our choices can come into play and our actions and help create a net positive balance. When it comes to exposures, it's all about a net positive. If we look at matcha tea, there's antioxidants in matcha. There's some nutrients. So those outweigh the little bit of lead that unfortunately is present, probably in most matcha tea products. It just happens that that brand was tested. Additionally, let's not forget, those nutrients that are in matcha tea can even block the absorption of those very chemicals. Half a teaspoon of matcha contains approximately 17 milligrams of iron, which helps block absorption of lead. So this is what I want to emphasize with all the information that we have access to every day. We have to take a step back and be like, okay, what is my overall potential exposure that I'm aware of? And what is within my control to reduce that exposure? And at the same time, we still have to be able to enjoy the things we love and also pay attention to our level of stress when it comes to our health and what contributes to that stress. You want to be careful with that. So this is the kind of things that I want to have in this segment to kind of, take a step back and be like, okay, this is the information. What does it mean in the context of my life? And what do I have control over? And what do I choose? What are my choices here? Because I think in years to come, we're going to be made aware of a lot of exposures that we didn't necessarily know about before. It's already started. So I think it's going to be even more important in weeks and months and years to come to have a really balanced approach to the whole thing. So this is what I had for you today in the Lymph Lounge. Now I'm going to go have a matcha tea made with filtered water. I hope you enjoyed today's topics. Keep it flowing, everyone, and I will see you in the next episode.